Oh, it
Sorry.
looks like it's that time.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Hi, I'm Becky Rares. I'm the moderator for this session. The presentation is Sakai 12, What's New and When Is It Coming? And it will be presented by Neil Caden, who works for the Apereo Foundation and is the Sakai Community Coordinator. Neil has background in higher education, project management, and community communications. The other presenter is Matt Jones, who works for Longsight, and this is his bio. He's an awesome developer, and he's a, okay, I can't say this right. Karaoke? No.
Karaoke?
Thank you. He's that master. Okay, so please note that all the attendees supposedly are supposed to be muted when they enter, though I don't know if that's really happening for sure. And if you want to ask a question, please unmute yourself. If you have any questions otherwise, enter them in the chat box. You can enter questions at any time, and we'll address them either during the session or at the end of the session. The session is also being recorded and will be available at a later date on the Sakai YouTube channel. And the last thing is, if you have any problems with video or audio, please enter a comment in the chat box. Thanks.
Thanks, Becky. This is Neil, and I wanted to also point out that that Matt's official title is Señor Programador de Longsight. So it's important to mention that. So Sakai 12, what's new and when is it coming? And I thought we'd actually start at the beginning at the end, meaning that we have QA servers, which I'll show on the slides, and you can actually go onto the QA server and see what the new thing is. And you can log in, you can create an account, you can create sites, you can play with different tools and features and see where things are at. And as part of our release notes, we set up what are all the new features. We query Jira directly. Jira is our community bug and feature tracking system. And so everything's completely out in the open. And to make it easy for you to find what's new, we have on our Confluence Wiki page, we have a Confluence Wiki page which has all of those tools broken out, so you can see what's new in the announcements tool, what's new in the assignments tool, and look tool by tool yourself. And because we're not going to be able to cover everything in this presentation. And here on this slide, I have the link that http nightly2.sakaiproject.org is where our nightly servers are, and you can see 11 versus 12 and even versus 10, and there's something called trunk master, which is also known as 13, which is going to be the next version of Sakai eventually. So you could even look at what the differences are so far between that and 12. Right now, between 12 and 13, there's not that much difference, but over time there will be. And so I just thought that would be a good place to start, where you have a little bit of a self-service and everything's out in the open, which is what Sakai is about. So there's a link to the new features by tool. So if I click on that link, it'll show you the page. So here it is, and you can see here's a list, like a table of contents for all the tools, and you could go and see if let's see, maybe go to chat, and here's the new things in chat, and if you click on it, you can get more. Well, it's showing 2 out of 2 issues, right? But some don't fit on the page. So if we look, here's an example of basic LTI where there's 10 new things that have been tasks that have been done or new features that have been added. And in the Confluence page, it's showing 5, but if you just click on the 10, it'll take you right to Jira, right to our community bug and feature reporting, and show you. And these are, the ones in green are definitely features. The ones that are blue with check marks are possibly features or possibly tasks. Since sometimes tasks kind of are like new features, that's why I included them there. But anything that's labeled explicitly a bug, kind of like that's a separate, kind of a separate query. I'm happy to share that as well, what bug fixes were made in any particular tool. Let's go back here, and it's cool. Where am I? So the first thing is just to show this is a screenshot of Sakai 11, and this is a screenshot of Sakai 12. So just to give you an idea that there was a lot of new kind of skin stuff added in the Sakai 12 versus Sakai 11 that makes it a little prettier, makes it a little easier to get around, things like that. And Matt, did you have anything you want to add about like the overall comparison of 12 versus 11?
No, I don't have any comments yet.
Okay, cool.
I'm here just to find out when it's going to get released.
Oh.
I'm joking.
Right, I know. Let's see. So the story. So it's interesting because the community, we have now a Sakai marketing, which is just community members getting together. Like, how do we don't have a marketing budget, right? Commercial vendors have marketing budgets that are millions of dollars or even tens of millions of dollars. So we want to have a story about what our releases are. But as we've had some discussion in the marketing group, we've realized that a lot of people outside in the community, we do care about that, right? Because what's new, we have our change processes. We have to figure out what we're going to implement for our, educational institution or our institution or not. But outside the community, the world at large, they don't really care as much about that. So the story I think we're eventually going to move to is more about what's special about Sakai as a whole. However, so this story is more about Sakai 12 versus 11 versus Sakai as a whole. And usually we try to distill the story down. Right now it's kind of a big story. We have, a couple of pages of possible ideas we want to narrow down to make it a more refined message. But there's an improved look and feel. You saw the skin there. There's an improved responsive design for mobile. So Sakai 11 was a huge release because we got implemented responsive design, which means that Sakai can automatically sense. This is a standard web technology now, and Sakai can automatically sense the size of the screen and adjust how it responds. And we've improved that significantly in 12, and that's thanks to funds that were raised from the Sakai virtual conference from last year. And that's pretty exciting. So this year, thanks to your attendance, we're going to raise more money, and then we'll have a committee. It'll be totally out in the open. People can join and listen and hear what how we're going to think about where to put the use of that funds and see what we can do for next year. There's a new tag service. So there's a central service in Sakai for 12 where you can have tags. I looked into it. It looked like it's very structured. So it looks like a very structured way of having tags that instructors can use, maybe within departments, maybe within schools, for being able to then label different questions in question pools, for example, and easily pull out, and find what you're looking for. The really cool thing, as I understand it, about tag service, and this is where Matt could correct me if I'm misstating, is that it's a central service. So theoretically, it could be applied to other tools. So it'll be really interesting to see how it's used for tests and quizzes, and then over time, if that turns out to be really a very popular feature, maybe we'll want to use it in other areas. The gradebook, there's some performance enhancements in the gradebook. That's one of the main things there. That's correct, Dave. Tags was not built with just Samigo in mind. It was built with the whole Sakai system. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's similar to search. How I think search was initially built just for content, and it got expanded a little bit. But it could go more. There's more possibilities for search, and I guess there'd probably be more possibilities for tags too.
Yeah, it might be really fun to have some time to figure out ways where we can talk about that as a community, how those search and tags things are working, and what would need, what people need. So there's a refactoring of an assignments tool, and that's really significant. It's making, and the impact for the community is that it'll make assignments more maintainable and easier to fix bugs in the future, and easier to enhance it and make it better in the future. And that's really important, and that's a part of the type of work. Both the gradebook performance enhancements, refactoring of assignments tools, things like that are sometimes called technical debt, where there's things we just have to get upgraded in Sakai in order to keep it up to date with the latest technology. And if we don't, over time we can suffer. So that's a really important change. There's some new bullhorns. These were sometimes called the Noodle contributions because Noodle partners contributed them back. I believe they were also deployed at Pepperdine University, so I believe they have an important role in that. So we'll show a little bit about that. They also contributed this new thing called a Comments tool, a new Connections tool. So those are new features. There's a bunch of lessons updates, actually, and I was just looking at some of them recently. There's some kind of cool stuff in there, which we'll talk about. Improved user interface for the chat tool. So they made the chat tool has been modernized, and this is not the portal chat for the whole system. This is the site tool where you're doing a chat within the site. Let's see, more on Samigo tests and quizzes improvements. It looks like we're very optimistic. We're gonna include extended delivery. We still have more QA that needs to happen, more bug fixing, I believe, but it's really improved a lot. I think we're just about ready to be good enough quality to release. Excuse me. Better support for math jacks for equations. Yeah, I meant to research that, the course management CSV loader, because I wasn't sure what that is or where I got that, and then I kind of slipped my mind to go back and look at that. Oh, let me mention the Hibernate 4 upgrade. That's another one of those technical debt things. It's really, really important to upgrade some of those behind-the-scenes technical infrastructure things, elements, because if we don't, then it makes it really hard to, over time, we could have security issues as a result of not keeping up with technical debt. It could be really hard to add new features in, take advantage of latest bug fixes from those libraries. So those are really important. So Matt, I meant to research that course manager and CSV loader. Is that something that actually is a thing, or did I make a mistake there?
I don't 100% know. I know there was a feature to improve how the imports were happening in Site Manage, but I don't know. It's not anything. It's not like a big bullet line. We don't have like. I know on the list recently some other SIS integration ideas were discussed, but that's not what this is. I think
this isn't.
So it's a minor enhancement to some existing CSV functionality.
So I'll update the slides after this and get that one off, because it doesn't seem like it's a big part of the story. If there was any improvements, it was probably a fairly minor thing with that respect. So we'll get rid of that one.
That's all I can see.
Yeah. So the high-level story, Matt and I kind of brainstormed this, and this is a high-level story that we think is for Sakai 12 and seems to be for Sakai 11, something that maybe is a trajectory, a direction, a roadmap almost of where Sakai seems to be going. There's a lot of interest in mobile improvements and responsive design and continuing to maintain and improve that. More beautiful and consistent interface. There's an effort in the community underway led by Duke University to have a Sakai UX inventory project so we can start identifying the elements and what will need to happen so that we can have more consistency across different tools. There's a lot of discussion in the community about next generation digital learning environment, which has to do with things like we're already very good at keeping up with a lot of standards like LTI and content item, which there's some new pieces in here that I don't know why I didn't have them in that high level story. They should definitely be in there, and I'll mention them in a second. But just really thinking about things like what other standards does Sakai really need to be brought up to par on so it can be really well positioned to be a next generation digital learning environment and lead that field. Some people in our community, I think, have good arguments why we already are to NGDLE, but I think we need to make even a stronger case. And then, as I mentioned, clean up legacy code, that's part of technical debt, and simplifying tools. So the less code that there is to maintain, the more focused the community can be on making what is there really, kind of a powerful environment. Did you have anything to add to this high-level story, Matt?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. By the way, just so I can kind of time myself, what time does this session go to? 9:25? Is that? 10:25. Is that right?
Yeah, it's supposed to go to 10:25.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that'll help me time myself a little bit here. So here's some additional screenshots. This is showing in Sakai 11. Here's the toolbar for site, and here's a toolbar on mobile. And then here's on 12, toolbar for desktop, site, and here's mobile. And you can see that they've been made to look more consistent. So when you go between the two environments, they they look about the same, and the presentation's been significantly improved on both environments.
Yeah, and the it's not in the screenshot, but other stuff in there is more consistent with the sites drop down, and just all these other buttons here are going to be just more consistent. Some parts of it didn't work very well in 11, especially in mobile, but that's 12 is a big improvement for mobile for these views.
And by the way, keep asking questions in chat, or interrupt. That would be okay with me, because that'd be really helpful. Here's another. Here's a screenshot. It's actually an animated GIF showing a new feature, which is in the interface, which is as you're tabbing over different tabs within, for example, this is site info. It's showing you what you're picking, what you're about to pick. And then in 11, there's no feedback.
So there's a lot of, like, this stuff is all accessibility mostly, and there's a ton of accessibility improvements for 12. Not really in the high level story, but there's stuff you'll notice, and especially for people who are using accessible devices.
And that reminds me, another thing I didn't put in the story, so I apologize. I guess I was spacing on things, but for 12, we are planning on having. We made a lot of progress between 11 and 12 on accessibility, and a big part of the story and a big part of our bigger story definitely should be accessibility. We're still looking like we're on track for getting WCAG level 2 AA or AA level 2 certification and a VPAT, and that may sound like gobbledygook, but it's getting a third-party outside vendor to assess the level of accessibility of the Sakai software. And the accessibility team has done a great job, and we've had really great support from the community. And that's going to be a really, really important and big feature. So I definitely need to add that to the slide. You can note of that. That is really important. So here's an example of some lessons things, starting some of the lessons tools and how it's been improved. This is one, on the left where it says enable lessons subpage navigation, the left tool menu, that's under site info. So you have to go under site info to enable this option. And then when you do, when you create subpages and lessons, they can appear as in the drop-down menu on the left, a little, I don't know what you call that little triangle thingy. Let's see, is the lessons feature currently showing able to be backported to 11.4? Really good question. I don't know offhand. Matt, do you happen to know offhand?
I don't know, but our focus is on 12. So whether or not it's able is not really something that a lot of us are thinking about. Getting 12 out is the top priority for developers and QA right now. So something like this, I think that the biggest issue is we don't like to introduce any UI changes to a previous release, and this is potentially a big UI change. But I don't know how easy or hard it would be offhand.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you, Matt. Right, we often, for a lot of reasons, we don't like to backport new features to. Not that it doesn't happen sometimes, but for a lot of reasons. And if we have time, and if people are interested in hearing about that, we can talk a little bit more about why we prefer not to do that. And that it does occasionally happen for other, because we're a flexible community.
Yeah, we kind of feel the release process is too slow, and that keeps people on older releases longer. And backporting takes significant energy, especially as tools diverge, like lessons and gradebook and assignments have for 12. Like, they're almost completely different tools. So it makes it very difficult. You have to rewrite everything twice sometimes, and that's just a lot of time spent.
And so the next feature showing here in lessons is one where you can go into resources. In this case, what I did was I created a folder in resources called Modernist Art Movements, and created 4 folders. I can then embed that directly in resources. Just say I want to show the Modernist Art Movements set of resources, content, right in lessons. People have access right from there. That's a pretty neat new feature in lessons. Here's some other features. Grant editing permissions on a lessons page to an individual. There's a new one. This has to be turned on with a Sakai property. I tested it out though, and it did work pretty well. There's several variable names like first name, last name, full name, so you can make it look like it's personalized to a student or user coming into the lesson site. It can automatically recognize a little information about that person. You can display conversation from forums, so you can have here's a conversation happening, a thread of conversation happening in forums. You can display the latest announcements. You can show the calendar. There's a Twitter timeline, which sounds pretty cool. It's off by default, and also when I tested it, I wasn't able to get it to work at the moment. So I think potentially that's a pretty cool feature if that gets fixed in time for the release. And there's an improved checklist functionality. For example, you can link from the checklist directly to other items on the lessons page. So that's a pretty neat one. So a lot of you may be familiar, well, I feel like everybody should know about this feature, but maybe you all don't. But I know I've done a lot of testing in this area, and I know a number of people in the community have done a lot of testing in this area. It's a pretty cool new feature. As I mentioned, there might be a little bit more to get it fixed, but it feels to me like it's the quality of it's getting to the point where it should be released for 12. And what it is, a very important feature for test and quiz tool of exceptions, meaning that you can set the parameters for a release of a test for the whole site. Like you can say for the whole site, the start date is this date, due date's this date, late acceptance, which is sometimes called retract date, is whatever date, and the amount of time you have to take the exam optionally is whatever. You can then make exceptions for groups that you define, or groups that are in there from sections, or even individual students. So in this example, for example, student 0181 has been given a different start date that's maybe earlier than the rest of the class. They can finish maybe later than the rest of the class. Maybe there's a reason for that that's between the student and the instructor. They have, I don't know why they would have less time to do it. That's kind of an odd choice I made there for an example, but that's the point, is that you have, the instructors will have flexibility that here's the release settings for the whole class, but if you need to make exceptions, then you can, and it's has it within that grade item. So let's see. So I'm seeing a comment in here. Are there recommendations for desktop, laptop versus mobile device usage of Sakai you might suggest? We've been generally recommending content consumption on mobile devices versus reserving more interactive applications, online assessments, working on assignments, etc. for desktops, laptops. We are on Sakai 11.4. So Matt, do you have any comment on that question?
I think that, yeah, 11 was kind of the first step toward getting a better mobile interface with the Morpheus responsive design. I feel like what you're suggesting is you probably have better. You'd probably work out better if you did what you're saying there for 11. For 12, I think the tools are getting a lot more testing, and with the new interface, should be a lot better for mobile. That was kind of part of the initial story for 11, is that we would have Morpheus like the portal level, and maybe some of the highest tools would be looked at. But for 12, we would dig deeper into the tools and make sure that the tools are also responsive and work well in mobile. So for something like, for a Sakai 11, it probably would be for the consumptions better than interactive. But there should be I would think that even assessments, I haven't personally tested it, but it should be okay in mobile. Writing long papers and stuff, it's still difficult. It's still always going to be difficult on mobile unless you have like a Bluetooth keyboard or something.
Thank you. What I would add to that is kind of tangentially related to that, but somewhat related, is that every once in a while there's mobile discussions that come up about whether we should have a mobile app separately. I think there have been some mobile apps that have popped up here and there. None of them has really taken off in terms of adoption in the community. But there seems to me like there's another round of discussion around whether we need a mobile app as a community, separate in addition to the responsive design. So that's kind of an interesting discussion that's happening. And I think there was a presentation this morning on that. So, so that's something to keep an eye on and to participate in if you have opinions about that, or to learn the thought process about, you know, what would be different, or what would be the value in a mobile app versus you know, a responsive native application. So I mentioned the tags earlier. This is just a screenshot. I just made these up. I made a medical. So it lets you create like these categories that as an administrator, and I made one called medical, and then I looked up medical terminology. I don't know if this is really what a medical school would look at. I'm guessing not. But then I can have these tags that are sort of tightly controlled, and then you have, that way the tags are not very freeform, which means they're more likely to be useful over time, especially within an organization, I would think. But that's something that will be really interesting to see how the community adopts that feature. So to use tags does require some configuration, some administration. It's not something where if you go into the Sakai 12 and take the what they call out of the box and just bring it up, you won't see this automatically. There's a little bit of setup involved. It is documented on a Confluence page so that you can get the information you need to get that started. It's not hard. I set this up pretty quickly. Samigo Test and Quiz Hotspot tool, that's the image tool. It's now responsive. I haven't tested that out. I'm excited to test that one out. That where you have the image and then it can scale down to your mobile device. So talking about mobile again. And there's a question pools improvement where now it will show points for questions in the interface as your, so it makes it a little easier. So you don't have to go right down to the question and open it up to see how many points by default that question gets. So a couple of little tweaks there that could be fun.
So like along the mobile question, you're kind of like saying, you know, Samigo, some parts of it were tested, but depending on the question type, like a hotspot question, it probably didn't work very well in 11, or probably doesn't work very well in 11 on a mobile device. But you know, since it's getting more testing, that was noticed and fixed. So that's, you know, it's, if you stick probably to like the most basic questions and you test it out, it should be okay still in 11. But yeah, it's better in 12.
So gradebook, I mentioned performance enhancements is really the big thing. I apologize, I don't remember exactly what the improved filter searching is. So I may need to go research that a little bit more. New grade points, yeah. I
think the improved filtering, it was like if you had more than so many people on if you only had like 50 people per page and you searched, it would only find people on that page. I think now it will it'll find them throughout the whole gradebook. So
okay, cool.
It's more of a global thing for large classes that kind of came along with the performance improvements.
Thank you. There's a new grade points grading scheme. There's more error checking on drop highest, drop lowest, keep highest, because there was ways of kind of using that were confusing. So it's a little clearer, and there's improved. I18N is an abbreviation for internationalization support. So that's really important to our community. That two things. That's really, I wonder if that's more. So there's two pieces of internationalization / localization, being able to localize Sakai for your where you live geographically, for example. So there's part of that is translations. Translation, you know, so Sakai has an open architecture so people can make translations. That's also an area where sometimes there's need for contributions from the community and doing those translations. And that's also localizations about how things like date, time work, how things like numbers are treated, right? Because commas and decimals are interpreted differently between different cultures.
And so it's more technical things. There's also the right to left issues for those languages.
Yep.
That
right, for the non-Roman languages, there's the right to left issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did mention the IMS content item, and I didn't put that in the story, but I think it should be in the story because it fits in with the NGDLE and it fits in with improved standards, and it's also pretty cool. So this is something called IMS LTI content item message. I think the name of this particular integration or this standard may have been changing recently. I think that's the right one, but
to deep links.
Deep links, maybe. Okay. That's fairly new. Like the name changes, they've been playing with name changes that make sense. recently. So here's an example within CK Editor I think is pretty cool. So there's a new shopping cart icon. You can click that. This is a link to Dr. Chuck's Python for Everyone class. So I easily created an LTI integrate. Didn't create the LTI integration. I took I implemented it by putting in the key and the connection. And then from anywhere you are in Sakai, in a CK editor, for example, you can click on that little shopping cart. And because I created that didn't create the integration, because I linked them together, and it's following that standard, I can pick the different types of content I want to show up right in my system. So kind of a really cool new feature, and you can use that within not just CK editor, but also lessons separately if you wanted it as a separate lessons item. So
that's just where it's it's implemented now. There's a lot of future possibilities for this content item.
There really is. I mean, this could morph into like an app store kind of idea for Sakai. So a lot of possibilities there.
There's also for maybe removing some code and some integrations for like for rubrics and for content review and things like that, for integrating the assignments. It probably going to be used for that kind of thing too. So it really will make integrations a lot nicer and a lot more consistent, easier to add once it gets added potentially to more tools. So it's kind of 13, 14, just brainstorming.
So this is one I mentioned. The Comments tool was one of the new contributions from Noodle Partners. This is showing. So what the Comments tool, it's kind of like a Facebook-like tool for being able to post items and then have comments on them like you would on Facebook. One of the things you can deploy this at a site level, for example, within your course site. What I've done here, by default, none of these permissions are checked. So I just checked it so instructors and TAs can do anything, and students, if you see here, cannot create new like Facebook-like posts, but they can reply to them. The other difference, and so I'll show this here where I posted as an instructor. I could have posted an image or something a little more visual here, but then I have responded as a student. So kind of a Facebook kind of like approach. It doesn't do real-time updates yet. If the community found like it needed to be real-time, like you have in Facebook, there would be, that would be a technology decision and figuring out what the best way is, and maybe a farm kind of project, I assume. But if the instructor logs on and the student logs on, they see it and respond, it would be more like a forums tool, right? So it's kind of cool. You should check it out. The Bullhorns tool is, there's two parts to the Bullhorns tool, and I see I'm getting low on time here.
Yeah, 7 minutes.
7 minutes, and I want to, so feel free to put it, jump out with questions, because we can go into the tools. I could just zip through these slides, and you can always look at the slides. You can look at the actual Sakai 12 QA environment to see what things look like. You can look at that Confluence page. So I don't have to spend. We could spend the rest of the time answering questions. What do folks want to do? Do you want me to just keep going through the slides, or? I'll just keep going through unless I hear otherwise. But.
There's only like 4 more, so. Okay.
So this one, there's 2 different types of things. There's academic bullhorns on the left here, which is things like if there's a new announcement on your course site or new assignment notification, those types of things should appear over here. And it tells you how many you have, and then you can look at them and clear them out. This one's for social notifications, for example, if somebody asked to make a connection with you through the site, because in Sakai we've had for a while now, though it hasn't been very visible, a way for people to connect with each other through asking to be a connection, like asking to be a friend on Facebook, that kind of thing. So you might be interested in checking that out. I thought this was something I had not realized. I knew we had talked about it in the accessibility group, but I just came across it, so I threw the slide in there, which is that we have this new preference. This is in preferences for the editor. Yes, I'll mention this Sakai. I got to get to the Sakai 12 status and when it will be released. Yeah, so it's part of like the big part of the title, and then I haven't talked about it yet. So yes, let me do that. And let me do that first, and then if we have time, we'll talk about the CK editor. Let me see what other slides we got. Well, actually, the next one is here, and I can go back. So this is just a cool thing because it can let you set how you want it to behave for you generally, whether you want a restricted set of buttons and features in the CK editor tool, or you want it to auto-detect based on what kind of device you're on. So
it was kind of a good feature because, like, you know, you can kind of, it's semi-easy to configure your button layout, and if you add new stuff to the buttons, so you know, you can, your basic or mobile can be different than what's out of the box, or the full can be different too. But a lot of people want always to see the full, even if they're on mobile, because they want the full functionality. And some people always want to see the limited because they configure it a special way for specific users. So they don't have to get, you know, be overwhelmed with all the buttons. So it's, otherwise it auto detects it. So it seems like there's a lot of possibilities here for the future too, and there's possibilities for dynamically configuring CK editor, which is, I thought was kind of cool too.
I think it seemed pretty cool to me. That's why I threw this slide in there, even though it wasn't originally part of this thing I was going to show. So the schedule dependency is really based on several things. One of them I was hoping would be done, but I mentioned should have mentioned on here is I mentioned the assignments refactor. That's very, very close to being done. It's one of those any day now types of things. That hasn't been given the green light to QA for testing it yet. So that's one of the dependencies for release that makes a release schedule uncertain at the moment. We have started getting people, institutions signing up for QA. We could use more communication. We need more people participating in the QA meetings so we can talk about where QA is at and what the needs are. And we need probably some more people signing up to do QA. So we do have some of the complex tools. We've got some institutions leading the way to test those complex tools. So the basic structure is an institution will have a prime, one or two prime contacts will lead the testing of, let's say, assignments tool or Samigo tool, and then others can help test that and then just ask, okay, where can you use help testing? And then they can point you the right direction of how to help test a tool. But we also have tools, especially some of the simpler tools where we don't have anyone signed up yet. So if you want to get involved in QA, that's a huge, huge help both to ensuring the quality of the release as well as the the quality of the release as well as the speed at which we can do it. Because then what happens is developers fix bugs we report. We have to be able to test them as quickly as possible so we can get them into the release and retest. So we're hoping still for an RCO1 by December. Due to those issues I mentioned, we're just starting to ramp up QA, so we're a little behind where we would like to be, but also the assignments tool not being given the green light for full QA yet, because that's developers is working on that. So our hope is RCO1 by December, which I think is still possible if we get a bit more community participation in QA testing, and then released by Sakai Camp, which is late January of 2018. But those are tentative times that have those big dependencies. If we don't get enough, QA, or for some reason some issues come up and we don't have enough development resources, that it could be an issue. At the moment, I'm not sure that's an issue. I'm not seeing that as an issue at the moment. But then the assignments tool as well. So hopefully that'll be done really soon. So that's kind of the thing. And the way the accessibility is working is the outside vendor, 1 to 2 minute warning, thank you. The outside vendor who's doing the accessibility, they're waiting for us to get to our first release candidate. So a first release candidate means that we think we've covered all the blocker anything that would block us from releasing. And then we create an RCO1. Then we do another round of intense testing, making sure there's nothing there that would prevent us from releasing. I see a question, so I'll try and answer that. Let me see what slides I've got left. Putting in a plug for Sakai Camp. This is a totally open opportunity to participate, and this very democratic and fun process. And it's a great way to network. It's a great way to learn more about what's happening within Sakai, and also to even influence the direction for Sakai. And then there's Open Apereo, which is in Montreal, Quebec next year. So I wanted to plug those. The question I wanted to answer, let's see, Fawi says, how do we make Sakai have unique selling points, or what do we think that those selling points are in 12 versus other LMSs? That's something we're working on. So we have a marketing group, and you're welcome to participate in that for anyone who's interested. We're just building a marketing plan now where we'll be talking about what we think those unique points are. I think part of them is along the lines of, I think open source is a part of that story, but we need to do it in a way that connects with what the benefits of that are. Why is open source powerful? Part of it is that folks like you can control the direction of where Sakai is going. I think the standards is going to be a big story, both accessibility, the LTI content item or deep links, things like that, that that we'll have, so we have a nice NGDLE environment. And then the other piece I think has to do with the flexibility of Sakai. So I think flexibility and control and standards to me are among things. But there's actually some, I know I have like no time left, but there's like some discussions in the community around NGDLE, so you might want to look for them and get connected with those discussions, because I think they will influence what our story is for Sakai. Is what is a next generation digital learning? How does Sakai already meet those needs, and how could it be improved to better meet those needs? I think that's going to be a big part of the story.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks,
we got to go to let the next people come in.
All
Thank
right.
you, everyone.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
It's a trivia contest next.
Oh, cool. Let's see, how do I get out of here?